Today, we're discussing a case that has been linked in the media to family crimes, and many of these crimes occurred in August before the start of the school year, which may lead to delays in the investigation process. According to former FBI analyst Candace DeLong, cases like Chris's are rare because those who kill their family members usually commit suicide after committing the murders. However, what this cold-blooded criminal did was unbelievable. On Monday morning, August 13th, 2018, this crime took place in a house in the state of Colorado, USA, involving a family consisting of a father named Chris, a mother named Shanann, and two children under the age of 4. The story began when Nicole arrived at Shannon's house and rang the doorbell, but no one answered. This raised concerns for her because Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant and had a scheduled visit to her OBGYN. Nicole called Chris to ask about Shanann and their children. Chris told her that he was at work and that Shanann had taken the girls to play with some friends' kids. However, since Shanann didn't respond to Nicole's calls or messages, Nicole became worried and decided to contact the police, who arrived before Chris got home. When the police arrived at Shannon's house, they were greeted by her friend and one of their friends. She told the police that she had been on a business trip yesterday and had dropped Shanann off at home at 2 a.m. She also informed the police about Shannon's doctor's appointment and that they had agreed to go to the clinic together. She also told the police that Chris had informed her that they were going to get a divorce and Shanann was unaware of it. She also explained to the police that her concern was Shanann not answering her messages and calls. The police and Nicole started knocking on the door several times and calling her phone, but no one answered, and they didn't hear the phone ringing inside the house. They checked the house from all directions to make sure Shanann and the girls were okay, but to no avail. When the police asked her if her husband had informed her that he was going home, she said, "Yes, he told me he was at work and he would be coming home." Meanwhile, Nicole called Shannon's mother, who told her that Chris had called her and said that Shanann was at a friend's house. Nicole was surprised by the inconsistency in Chris's story, so she asked the police to break into the house. However, the police told her that they needed Chris's permission. They asked for Chris's phone number so that they could call him. When they called him, he identified himself and asked about his wife and the girls. He expressed his concern for them, fearing that Shanann might be unconscious because her car was in the garage with the girls' car seats. Nicole's friend became suspicious and told the police that Chris was lying because he had different stories for everyone who asked about Shanann. He also informed the police about the presence of surveillance cameras in the neighbor's house. Finally, Chris arrived home, pretending to be calm. He entered the house and took a minute before opening the door and allowing them to enter. Up to that moment, the police had no doubts about him. Everyone started searching the house, and Chris informed the police that the girls' blankets were missing and that they wouldn't go anywhere without them. He also showed them Shannon's phone, saying he found it in the room. The police began asking Chris some questions about his whereabouts. Nicole asked him to watch the surveillance camera, but he said it wasn't working. The neighbor began checking his surveillance cameras and contacted the police to inform them that no one had left the house except for Chris. The police officer went to Chris's house to ask him several questions about his work schedule, his arrangements for taking the two girls to school, and their separation. Chris answered that they were handling the divorce calmly and planning to sell the house. Then he entered one of the rooms and came out with his wife's ring in his hand. Afterwards, the police officer decided to contact the detective due to the suspicious situation. Then, the police officer decided to go to their neighbor's house to view the cameras. Everyone was watching attentively except Chris, who turned his back to the screen and pretended to be busy with his phone. When the scene of his car standing in front of the camera appeared, he became nervous and afraid. He made a spontaneous gesture of holding his head to calm himself down and started swaying left and right, even though he deliberately parked his car at an angle that obstructed the view of what he was doing. The back part of his car was not visible to the camera because it was parked inside the house's garage. At the end of the viewing, Chris was the first to leave the neighbor's house. After he left, the neighbor began criticizing Chris's behavior, saying that he talked too much and kept moving all the time, which was not his usual behavior. He also revealed to the police officer that Chris's family frequently argued and yelled, and he disclosed his suspicion that Chris was hiding something from the police. On the following day of the disappearance, Chris agreed to have a television interview with a news channel. He said, "My wife disappeared and I want her to come back home desperately. "I want my children to come back home." And he said his famous phrase that he had no idea where they were and he didn't even want to speculate. He just wished that they were in a safe place with the children, and the previous night was terrifying without his children. He needed to see everyone again. Then he was summoned to give his testimony without any charges being filed. At the beginning of the interview, the investigator asked him to hand over his phone as a routine procedure to review the communications between him and his wife. The investigator confronted him about the conflicts between him and his wife and asked about the possibilities that could be going through the minds of those around him. Chris criticized what the investigator implied and said that such thinking made him nauseous. He claimed he couldn't harm anyone in his family. During the investigation, the investigator asked him, "Do you have any objection to taking a lie detector test later? And what should we do when we find the man who hid your family?" Chris replied asking, "They will come back safely, won't they? Will you find the man?" At the end of the investigation, the investigator told him that he acquitted himself well in this difficult conversation. The investigator then asked him about his marriage and infidelity, but Chris denied being unfaithful. Then, the investigator confronted him, saying that the police officers were not convinced that he had no connection to the disappearance of his family because nothing he said seemed logical or truthful. The investigator pressured Chris and asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph test the next day. Chris agreed. Chris arrived on time to take the lie detector test, and the investigator sat with him to explain how the device worked. She cleverly and professionally applied pressure on him. When they finished conducting the test, another investigator joined them, and they informed Chris that he did not pass the test. They asked him to tell them what happened. At first, he was adamant in denying everything, but under pressure from the investigators, he eventually made his first confession that he had cheated on his wife and spoke extensively about his lover. However, the investigator asked him to switch the topic and talk about his wife and 2 daughters instead of his lover. Chris returned to denial, and they continued to press him several times. Ultimately, he requested to speak to his father, who was waiting outside the interrogation room. The 2 investigators left, and his father entered, giving him enough time to talk to his father. Chris told his father that he had spoken to Shanann in the morning and that she was emotional and heartbroken due to their separation. He claimed that she harmed the 2 daughters by choking them while he was downstairs, so he killed her in self-defense. His father was shocked by his son's confession to killing his wife. After offering him the option to contact a lawyer, the investigators re-entered the room in less than 10 seconds and emotionally engaged with him to divert his thoughts from the lawyer. They asked him to repeat what he said to his father, and he told them that his wife choked the children, and he witnessed their blue skin and lifeless bodies. They started questioning him about the location of the bodies, and he cried while asking out what would happen to him. The investigators tried to extract another confession that he was the one who killed the children, but he insisted that Shanann was the one who choked them. He was arrested and a murder charge was filed against him. Chris's mistress was summoned for questioning, and the real goal of the police was to determine if she was involved in the crime or not. The interrogation with her lasted for 2 hours, during which she stated that upon reviewing her interactions with Chris, she realized that he had been lying even to their mutual friends. She claimed that she had no knowledge of his actions and was shocked by what he did to his family to be with her alone. On August 16th, the police went to retrieve the bodies of Chris's family from an oil storage site, and Chris led them to the disposal location. The bodies of the 2 girls were found in crude oil storage tanks, while the mother's body was buried in a shallow grave nearby. The bodies of the girls, Bella and Celeste, were pushed through an opening in a different oil tank, and according to the forensic examination, Bella had scratches on her left buttock as a result of being pushed through that opening. A strand of blonde hair was also found on the edge of one of these openings. On August 21st, Chris was charged with the 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. He was considered a trustworthy suspect.
Which means...
That's just the test.
I know. It just says the pink is going to be girls.
I don't know. Just the test.
That's awesome.
Guess what, girls? Mommy has a baby in her belly. Are you guys excited? Yes? Are you really excited? Oh my goodness. Come give me hugs.
During his first trial, he was denied bail, and at a subsequent hearing, his bail was set at $5 million. On November 6, 2020, the verdict was issued against Chris. At the beginning of the trial, both Shannon's and Chris's parents, as well as Shannon's brother, delivered statements in court. Chris was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the intentional killing of Shanann Watts, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the intentional killing of Bella Watts, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the intentional killing of Celeste Watts, and 48 years for the unlawful termination of a pregnancy, referring to the unborn child named Nico. Chris's mother was attacked after delivering her statement because she said she loved Chris. Some sources claim that Chris's mistress is in a witness protection program, and an insider stated that she received multiple threats and faced public defamation. She could be considered one of the most hated women in America, and is planning to start anew with a new name, a new city, and ultimately a new identity. All the events we narrated in this video were based on the following case through audio and visual sources, from the initial report to the verdict. We hope you enjoyed the video, and remember to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and activate the notification bell to receive updates on new content.